Hello, this is old Mr. Kent of MrKent.com, and I'm taking off in the morning here in Arizona because the daytime temperatures get up too high to fly my Mavic Air 2, so I fly in the morning because the temperatures are much lower. And I'm taking off from my son's property where we have just recently moved in order to, we sold our house in the HOA and got out to where we're more like out in the countryside. So anyway, it's very enjoyable and it's new territory to explore. And one of the things that I'm doing with this flight is when I was in town, I would fly. I used to do like flight plans with my. I sold all my ham gear when I moved down here 4 years ago and bought a Bebop 2, and it had a flight plan thing, and so I'd fly over to this abandoned field which is straight ahead, and we're going to try to get down there. It's a no-fly zone, but I'm not going to fly onto it. I just want to see if I can get close to it from where I am here. So that's the plan, and I'm just exploring this new neighborhood, I guess you'd say. In the meantime, I'll tell you a story. Now, one of the things I did is I flew straight down, and I got by the houses, and their Wi-Fi's interfered, and so I decided I better back up and go, fly around the loop. So anyway, that's what you'll see happen here. Well, I'll tell you a story. My pastor who got me into flying, at that point in time had a Beechcraft V-tail Bonanza, which they don't make anymore. But anyway, it's a real powerful plane, has a 250 horsepower engine, has retractable gear, adjustable pitch prop, and all the other things that go with it. And so it's a very heavy plane. And in my last video, I talked about flying from Washington State down to California to pick up my brother's plane, and the trip before that we had gone down and picked up my 170. So my 170 was fairly new to me at that point in time, but previously my pastor had wanted me to get certified in his Bonanza because he once in a while he'd go across the state to preach somewhere, and he wanted me to go with him. And then if he was getting old, and if he had physical problems, I could take over and fly the plane. So it was a blessing to be able to get certified to fly what they call a high-powered engine airplane. So one of the things that I remember, it had so much power, and it was a heavy airplane, but it had a lot of power. And so the instructor said, we're going to do an ascending stall. That would be like if you were taking off and you were dumb enough to pull up on the yoke, or pull the nose of the airplane up too steep with the engine going full bore, but you pull it too steep and then the airspeed slows down, and then you go into what's called a stall. The plane can't fly, and so it just noses into the ground. Well, so we were simulating that, and that's a typical exercise when you're practicing to get certified. So anyway, he said, let's do that. So I gave it full power, and I started climbing back, and I pulled back on the yoke. And I remember looking up at the blue sky, and I got the yoke pulled all the way back, and I'm looking at blue sky, and nothing's happening. It just keeps climbing and climbing. And so I keep looking back, and I'm a skinny little guy, and so the instructor said, no, you're not pulling back hard enough. I was pulling back hard, so I finally just gave it all I had and put my feet against the floor and pulled back, and sure enough, then it went into the stall, the nose dropped, and the idea is to catch it and get it straightened out before you lose 50 feet of altitude. So I passed that part, no problem. But anyway, that's the kind of plane it was. And so my pastor was used to flying that all the time. And then I came back from California with my 170, and of course, years ago, he had a tail dragger. Now, a tail dragger has the steering wheel in the back, and if you notice, the Bonanza has the steering wheel up in the front, so it lands real easily. But like if you go to the grocery store and turn a grocery cart around so the swivel wheels are in the back and give it a shove, it'll immediately want to turn around and put the wheels and the swivels in front. And so that's the kind of the way a tail dragger is. Okay, now we're up to where I finally started to get a weak signal, and so I stopped and I thought, okay, here's this about as close as I can get to that airstrip. As you can see, the old runways that are there, that's from the Second World War. It's an auxiliary field to the Gateway Airport, the Mesa Gateway Airport, which was the main field during the Second World War, called Williams Field. So anyway, when I got my Bebop 2, I discovered that. And so the first thing I did was just came out and took off next to the field and got some shots of it from up about 400 feet and saw what I could see with my Bebop 2. And here's a clip from that video. And as you can see, I'm much closer to the field. It wasn't restricted then. And there's the runways. There was a crosswind runway, and then that's the main runway there that we're looking at. So that kind of intrigued me. Abandoned things intrigue me, and aircraft fields and stuff, they intrigue me too. And so now we'll pan across what it looks like now. But during World War II, many, many men who went to battle for this country learned to fly and take off and land on that particular airstrip. So anyway, back to the story. When I got my Cessna 170 and I brought it back from California, I had probably flown it or landed it maybe a half a dozen times. And by the way, learning to land the tail dragger is the first time I landed it, we were all over the runway, and the instructor took over, and I said to myself, I just spent $6,000 on a plane I'll never be able to land. But with a little bit of practice, I was able to make it land and keep going straight. Because just like a grocery cart, if you push it backwards, it wants to turn around. And when you're landing at 60 miles an hour with a tail dragger, it wants to turn around. So you have to be really quick on the pedals to keep it going straight. So I had just gotten back. Now I'm zooming in here because I want to show you this is looking south, and you see that green area that just came in on the right side? That's called the Queen Creek Wash. And I have flown my drones in that Queen Creek Wash over, and if you have been following my channel at all, right there, that's the Queen Creek Wash. And I used to fly down through all the little trees in there. It's a flood prevention thing. It's a big dip in the ground that they've made. And this is a clip from coming up. I used to go down in through there and fly between the trees, and I called it chasing critters. But there were usually a lot of cottontail rabbits down there. And I just went down to fly around and see if I could spot any. And as you can see on the right-hand side, that's my favorite flying part. And I won't be able to get there as much as I used to because it's a bicycle ride of about 4 miles now. But now we're looking up the Queen Creek Wash, and that's what it looks like. And it was one of my most most common and favorite flying spots. So anyway, so that's looking at it, and now we'll just get back to the story here. So anyway, he wanted to fly my Cessna 170, and so I said, okay. So we went out to the airport, and he had a tail dragger years before, and so I figured, he could take off and land it, no problem. So he got on the left seat, and I got on the right seat, and we took off, and first of all, he gave it full power, and we're going down the runway, and with his plane, you got to go about halfway down the runway before it even starts to fly. With a little light Cessna, which was about half the weight of his plane, all of a sudden it was off the ground, and he panicked, and he says, "You take over," because we were drifting over the sagebrush off the runway. So I got it straightened out and got it up, and then I let him fly it, and he did fine. He had fun, and then we came around. We came in on final, and we're just getting really close to the runway, and he said, "You land it." Now, let me tell you, I'd only landed it maybe a half a dozen times and trying to keep it straight, and now I'm sitting on the right side, so everything the right hand does, the left hand has to do, and everything the left hand does, the right hand has to do. So everything's mixed up and backwards, and he wants me to land my tail dragger. Well, as the story ends, yes, I was able to keep it on the runway, and I was blessed. I think the angels were helping me or something. Anyway, we landed it, and everything came out fine, and he eventually ended up getting himself a tail dragger because he liked the idea so much. Well, that's the story for this trip, and I'm sorry for taking so long, but wanted to go explore and take you with me. And I want to thank you for watching, and God bless.